Thank you, Randy, for your very kind introduction. Loretta Johnson and Mary Catherine Ricker, it's certainly a pleasure to be here. Is there anyone here from Virginia? Where's Virginia? Clap, I don't see. All right, right in front. Good to see you. Thank you.
It's early.
Thank you. Randy, I want to thank you and the AFT for all the work that you do each and every day to make our nation and our working families stronger. I want to thank you not only for your service to students in our communities, but also adding your collective voice to working families and progressive values. Today, more than ever, the AFT is at the forefront of the fight for fairness and equity for students, workers, and their families. As a senior Democrat on the Committee of Education and the Workforce, I stand with you in advancing progressive agenda that will move our country forward. Thanks to your leadership and partnership, we've realized some monumental gains recently, but obviously we have a long way to go. December marked the enactment of the Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA, ending the No Child Left Behind era of public education. As you know, the federal role in public education really began with Brown v. Board of Education in 1954, when the court said that it is doubtful that any child may reasonably be expected to succeed in life if denied the opportunity of an education. Such an opportunity is a right which must be made available to all on equal terms. Well, then you look up and we're funding education with the real estate tax. That actually guarantees that you're going to have unequal education. Wealthy areas will obviously have more resources than low-income areas. And so in 1965, as part of the war on poverty, President Johnson signed the ESSA, Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which provided funding to low-income areas to support low-income students, especially in areas of high concentration of poverty. No Child Left Behind came after that. Said you not only have to look at money, but you have to look at results. You have to ascertain whether all children are succeeding by establishing whether or not there are achievement gaps, and if so, you have to do something about it. Unfortunately, as time went on, it looked like we're having too many tests, and the response to failure often just didn't work. And so we passed the Every Student Succeeds Act. As one of the four principal authors, I'm glad to have had Randy and the AFT as a true partner. We worked together to ensure that your concerns were heard and that priorities were reflected in the final conference report. We had some challenges. Some people wanted to deal with the achievement gap by eliminating all tests, which meant that you wouldn't know whether you had an achievement gap. Well, that's one way to deal with it. And then if you lucked up and found out you had an achievement gap, they didn't want to do anything about it. And the final insult was that was in the money. They said that you want to do what they call portability. Pass the money around based on the number of low-income students. Well, that sounds reasonable until you recognize that the formula also included a factor for concentrations of poverty. After the money's been spread around, if you have a high concentration of poverty, if you have 15% poverty, you get a little extra. 30% poverty, you get a little more. And what the spread it all around did was those high concentration of poverty started losing money. Just an example, Los Angeles, 70% poverty, would lose about a quarter of its money, where Beverly Hills, with virtually no money, would have a significant increase. Well, the final version, we gave a lot more flexibility to states and localities, but we gave no flexibility on the fact that you have to do an assessment and you have to deal with achievement gaps. And we also put the money back to where it needed to be. We don't tell the localities and states how to do it, but we tell them they must ascertain the achievement gaps and do something about it. We didn't ignore the resources. We made sure that the money was there. We want to congratulate the AFT for making sure that adequate resources was actually a fundamental issue in a lot of areas, particularly Detroit, Michigan. where you made a particular stand. The AFT has been a strong advocate in all of that, making sure those resources are there. I'm particularly proud of the new law's requirement of stakeholder engagement. We have encouraged Secretary King to work with states to remove barriers to teacher and paraprofessional involvement in plan development. As the implementation goes forward, I encourage all of you to claim your seats at the table so that you know, claim your seats at the table because you know the old adage, if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. Work together with friends in the civil rights community to ensure that states and districts adopt student-centered policies. And I'm delighted to hear that the AFT has already passed a resolution addressing that kind of involvement, particularly making sure that the LGBTQ students have their concerns addressed. Strong implementation of ESSA will empower all states and all school districts to prepare students, regardless of background, for college and career, but this won't happen without your involvement. Now, speaking of college and career, I also want to thank the AFT for your advocacy in developing a bipartisan Perkins Career and Technical Education, CTE, reauthorization bill. The pending bill is called Strengthening CTE for the 21st Century Act. On my visits to CTE programs, I've seen how working with business, industry, workforce development boards, communities, and the education community can produce good CTE programs which will produce high school graduates who are not only ready to enter the workforce, but also equipped with credits towards licenses and certifications, even access to post-secondary degrees. Now, speaking of career education, it reminds me of a recent governor in Virginia that seemed to be all of a sudden became a strong advocate for good vocational education programs. And I found out what happened. Turns out that right after he was inaugurated, he moved into the governor's mansion and noticed that there was a plumbing problem. Rather than go through general services requiring 3 low bids and contract disputes, he did what most people would do. He just called a plumber. Plumber showed up, looked at the problem, went out in the truck, grabbed some tools, fixed it up. He was there 15 minutes, handed the governor a bill, $150. The governor looked at the bill and said, $150, good God Almighty. When I was practicing law, $150, that's $600 an hour. When I was practicing the law, I never charged anybody $600 an hour. And the plumber said, well, Governor, I know what you mean. Because when I was a lawyer, I never charged anybody $600 an hour either. And so, with the reauthorization of CTE and expanding opportunities for high school students to participate in dual enrollment programs and community college and other initiatives to improve access to actual jobs, we're going to pass a good CTE bill. But unlike the old-fashioned vocational education programs, which were an alternative to the academic educations, modern CTE programs will be in addition to the academic programs. We no longer have a situation where you can get one good job early and stay there for 40 years. We expect people to change jobs at least 7 times, and if you're not academically prepared to get ready for the next job, you're going to be lost. In fact, we found that 2/3 of the jobs in the future will require some education past the high school level. So if you don't even have a high school diploma, you're going to be relegated to the low-paid, no upward mobility jobs. So we have to do more to have better access to college and to make college accessible and affordable and break down barriers for low-income students to access and complete meaningful degrees. And so our attention will turn pretty soon to the Higher Education Act, and I stand with you in our fight for a strong reauthorization that increases the number of students who can attend college, lower the cost of those that do attend college, and then make sure that they can complete college when they get in. That way they can receive the credentials that will have value in the job market, and I know that the CTE programs are an effective way to do this. Incidentally, we also know that CTE programs can be a powerful student engagement tool with students to prevent dropouts. We know that those dropouts will be relegated and destined to very few job prospects, higher involvement in social service and criminal justice. In addition to strictly educational issues, I want to thank the AFT for what you do to improve working conditions for all workers. We know that workplace safety is an important issue, both in schools and, of course, beyond schools. AFT's leadership and nationwide efforts to prevent workplace violence, especially in healthcare facilities, is one of the issues that you're addressing. Healthcare facilities are perceived to be pillars of safety and well-being, but the reality is, in day-to-day work, these facilities expose far too many employees to unacceptably high risk of injury from medical devices and exposure to disease, but also exposure to violence. To assess the threat of violence, many colleagues and I requested a GAO report to examine the prevalence of workplace violence in healthcare facilities and to review efforts of OSHA and states to address the problem. The results are in. The review found many troubling statistics showing that violence was unreasonably present and unfortunately getting worse. And so the GAO report exposed the magnitude of the problem, and we know this problem is a foreseeable hazard which in many cases can be prevented through risk assessment, employee engagement, mitigation strategies, and incident evaluation. California, for example, saw a significant decrease in assaults after the implementation of a violence prevention program in hospitals. So based on the evidence that we now have, Senator Murray, Senator Franklin, Representatives Courtney Wilson, and I sent a letter to Labor Secretary Perez this past Monday requesting the Occupational Safe and Health Administration develop a comprehensive violence prevention standard to protect America's workers in the healthcare and social service workplaces. Now, this effort will be more effective because it comes right after AFT's petition to ask OSHA for a national violence prevention standard. So I look forward to continuing to work with you to push enforcement of workplace violence prevention standards to protect workers in healthcare and other settings. Now, our fight to improve workplace safety is just one example of why your voice is so important. The success of the House Democrats' Working Families Agenda will depend on support of the AFT and other unions. The Working Families Agenda includes 3 parts: increased wages, balancing family and work, and ending workplace discrimination so that everybody can get a fair shot. The increase in wage part includes increasing the minimum wage, supporting the new overtime policy so that you get paid for the work that you do, making sure that we can simplify union elections so that more people who want to join a union can actually join a union. By the way, your victory in the Fredericks case will go a long way in making those initiatives possible. But it's not going to be easy. The Republicans in Congress, since they took over in 2011, have had 24 hearings trying to undermine the ability of people to join and enjoy the benefits of unions. Now, balancing family and work also includes overtime rule, because hopefully people will start respecting the 40-hour work week and not working people 50 and 60 hours a week with no additional pay. It will include the Family and Medical Leave Acts and also new rights to make sure that you can have effective schedules that work. Also, access to affordable child care. And anti-discrimination provisions include enforcing all of the anti-discrimination provisions, especially race, women, LGBTQ, and so everybody can get a fair shot. And I want to thank you for your strong support for racial justice and for fighting racial injustice, particularly as it applies to the criminal justice system. Now, in closing, I am immensely proud to count the AFT as a partner to fight for fairness and equity on behalf of students, workers, and communities. I want to thank you for your leadership throughout the last Congress, and I look forward to continued partnership in the months and years to come as we fight to strengthen working families across the country and fight to educate our next generations. Thank you very much.